July meeting here in Crested Butte for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, the Commission. First up is Mr. Chick. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioners, Chair, Director. Corey Chick, License and Pass Manager. What I was going to do today was give you an update on two pretty major items, one being IPAWS and the other being on the draw. I think that hopefully, no, that's all right. Can you hear me now?
Very good.
Okay. Let me go ahead and move this forward.
Oh, you do have.
Maybe.
Oh, here. Sorry, Corey.
No, it's okay.
Okay. So keep those.
There you go.
So what we have up here right now is the high-level milestones for the phase 2 of the project, of the IPAWS project. This does not include what we've done. Trying to find my distance. It doesn't include what we've done in phase 1. Phase 1 is more the operational side, where phase 2 is the developmental side. The thing is, within phase 1, we're actually in both areas, both operationally and developmental, which anyone that's done that creates a lot of work, it's a lot of change. A lot of what we're doing to continue to work on is stabilization of the operational system. So the system we're using every single day to either make reservations, sell licenses, or sell passes. We're also working a lot on defects that we found. We definitely learned that you can have a user acceptance testing, but the true test is once you go live and you actually have customers sitting in front of you. We learned a lot from that, and I think there'll be a lot of change we end up making in the system due to that test. My current biggest risks right now that I have actually lie with the vendor, both from a resource standpoint and from their quality assurance. We continue to try to work on them. We have weekly meetings, stand-up meetings with their executive team. About the only thing I could have them do is hire more folks. And you'll see it in here. When we originally were talking about moving things post go live and going live with about 75 to 80% of the system last January, We were hoping for an August release in a lot of those items that we were moving forward. You'll notice on the dates, we're looking at fall of 2019, which is good and bad. I mean, I never want to carry anything out further than what it has to be, but the nice thing about us carrying that out is we were able to, one, we have a really good PM on staff right now. We were also able to bring in a BA to look at all the requirements, the business need documents, and then do a full write-up. The 2.5 years I've been on this project, especially prior to go live, there's been a large amount of we interpret it this way, they interpreted it a different way. Bringing that BA in, the business analyst, it's made a lot of that. Hopefully we fleshed that out to where it's very detailed. They know exactly what we want. So when they build these, at least there's three major modules that they're building. They're building HRS, VRS, and special licensing. But incorporated that, two other big things that they're doing is the data mart, which is going to be, sorry. That's where we're going to pull ad hoc reports or on-demand reports. And then we also have the historical data load. Currently, right now, we have a little over 3 years of data in the system, customer data, license and pass data, or mainly license data. But having that BA on will ensure that when they build those 3 modules, it's what we need, so we don't have a UAT and then end up with what may be a 40 to 50% pass rate like we've seen in the past. I'm more hoping around the 80 to 90% pass rate, and then they have 10 or 15% that they need to fix prior to us pushing those into production. So that's about it for the IPAWS update. Unless you have any questions, I can.
Commissioner Vigil.
Corey, you mentioned your biggest concern is with the vendor.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. Would it be wise to have the executives of the vendor come in front of the commission and answer some questions?
It's something I mean, I'd like to sit down with Gary and have that discussion. It's getting to the point of I mean, they just rolled a new Salesforce out on us, and I mean, there for a while it wasn't working. We had no ticketing system. So we had no way to answer to tickets, and when we did, we had always set, or when I got in here, we had set a kind of a standard that when we sent information out, each side, whoever that was going to, would answer that within 2 business days. There's items we're asking on now that's better than 3 weeks to a month old and that haven't been touched. And this is stuff that we're bringing up every single Wednesday meeting when we're meeting with them. So, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. The product is a really good product, and it has a really good potential. But I think it would be, me personally, I think there are things that they could address on how they're going to get better in the future, because this is something, you know, the contract is actually due up for extension in 2020. I think from a field standpoint and from an office standpoint, if we don't see huge changes in 2019, I think it makes for interesting discussions come April 30th, 2020, on how they're going to ensure that they're going to carry forward that product that they've always promised, so contractually.
Well, this system is so important to the agency and to our public. We need to get it right, and if these guys are dragging their feet, we have some commissioners that can hold their feet to the fire. Not me, but there are someone that are tough.
And Commissioner Vigil, I can give you a prime example. Commissioner Zip, yeah, I mean, your pass is completely faded. That's something that's been in fail status since prior to go live. That's something I've been, monthly harping on what we're going to do about getting new printers out to our agents, offices, parks, everything, so that, we're not having this issue. And it's something that, again, whether it's resource, financial, whatever their reasoning is going to be on that, it doesn't matter to me. I want new printers. I can't have passes fading in 4 months.
Well, it would be good to know if there are problems in responding to things like printers and some of the other issues that you have.
Sure.
Is it financial? Are they just not capable of delivering? And I think the only way we're going to find out is to have them in front of us.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
Thank you. I know they've been in front of us a number of times, and I don't know that we always get things resolved during these sessions, when they come before us. So, it might be good to, if we need to have a little work session with them, I don't know. Sorry, I have and then on a sort of related but unrelated note, I think I remember a couple of years ago, IPAWS, the biggest component was the licensing component, which were, of course, rolled out, and we have a lot of feedback, and as you mentioned, a lot of things worked really well, a lot of things we like, a lot of things we need to fix, and we've learned a lot of lessons, and we're going to be fixing those things. But there were a number of other items that were rolling out more than just the licensing thing. And I know for me, one of the things, of course, I've been wanting was a mobile app, so that I could have my fishing license or my hunting license, and maybe it's not a fishing or a hunting license, but maybe my state park pass, or from the forum yesterday, maybe it's whatever comes out of, my recreation sticker can be on my mobile app. So just wondering where that is in this stage is, the licensing was the keynote rollout piece. What are the follow-up components? And I'm sure they're probably in here, and I just need to look a little more deeper.
And the mobile app's not. I mean, they do have a mobile app that because it would have to go through that developmental phase too, we've yet to roll that out. We are about to meet with DNR, with My Colorado, as far as, I know they're going to run a demo with My Colorado and how that would work with IPAWS as far as having some of that capability that you're talking about. I will continue to press on the mobile app. I know that's always been a strong point with the commission, and I'll continue to press that. Both from, because there's numerous apps that they have related to that, whether it's a law enforcement app or if it's a customer facing app. So I will continue to do so.
Commissioner Haskett.
I have a question regarding I have a client that was successful in the elk draw, and we give a fishing license to those who out-of-staters, and he wanted to go fishing, but he doesn't have his license, and he went to a store like Zip to get a license, and they couldn't do anything. Is that a training issue? Is it a system issue?
It's not. There's not because it's a combination license, it's not a standalone. So, and this has come down, there's been law enforcement guidance on this, on how the field will handle it. It's due to whether we're talking about PII issues or anything like that, as far as all of our agents being able to print a customer record. That is an option for the customers to do, to go to one of our offices or parks. They can print out their customer record where it shows their license history. And per law enforcement directive, they can fish using that until they get their license in hand.
Okay.
There's also a TAN that prints, and it's if they're going, I understand that, but it's either or. It's either the temporary authorization, but it's really better for them to print that license history, because that way it's not just valid for 14 days. They can just keep it with them until they get their license in hand.
Is that something an agent can do? Like, this was on a weekend, so the local office was closed.
It is something actually the customer can do. Because of the online component of IPAWS, they can actually go onto their account
Okay.
and be able to download some of this or save it to their phone to where if they're checked in the field, they can show that. The officer also has capabilities to call in. I mean, we do want them to have a license or that form in their possession while they're hunting or fishing, but
Okay.
there are options that even the customer with the online availability now can
Okay.
actually do that themselves, so.
Yeah, I didn't think about the phone part. Okay, thank you.
Corey, I know you've got some very, I know the public wants to hear the next part of the presentation, so go ahead, Alex, if you'd like to talk, but what I was going to summarize is I think there's overwhelming consensus that we'd like to have the executives back. That was my sense. The question I would just ask you to pass on to them is I'm a little shocked to be here. I mean, we've had this backsliding issue, you know, where performance picks up, we get to a point, we seem to be successful, and then we have a meeting where suddenly we backslid on performance. And so, you know, I just want them to know that's going to be the question out of this commissioner's mouth. Why do we have this? You know, we do well, we catch up, we seem to have great chemistry with the teams, and then here we are, another meeting, and it just strikes me as surprising. So that'll be what, at least I'll be asking.
Sure, and I don't want to make you think the sky's falling,
Right.
but it needs to be better.
I think we had a lot of goodwill built
We did.
up.
We did.
And
And it's starting, I don't disagree with you. I mean, it's somewhat starting to backslide, and I'm wanting to catch it before it gets too bad.
we appreciate you bringing it to our attention.
Sure.
So sorry, Alex, if I just,
Yeah, I mean, I think that pretty much addressed what I was going to say, aside from, you know, when we're coming up on the go live date, we had kind of the checklist and, you know, these regular updates, and, you know, the executives were attending basically every meeting. So if we need to go back to that to get stuff done, then we should, but they need to hopefully understand the urgency, and if it's the checklist and every meeting they're here talking with us and you know, we're getting weekly updates, then we'll go that route. But yeah, there's concerns are heard here, and we want to echo them back via you to the company and make sure that they're giving us their full attention.
Will do. Thank you. Rip the Band-Aid off. So changes in the draw. I want to start out with a little bit of history on why we're at where we're at today. And I think it was in Ray that I first come in front of the commission and talked about going paperless, what that would entail, why we needed to do it. A lot of that revolved around the previous topic of IPAWS. The system we were going to was not a system that was able to take paper applications. And if we were talking about an error-free paper application, it would have been able to do that. The problem is in our draw, about 95% of our errors that we receive in the draw came from paper applications. So at a long-standing need or want and a request from the vendor, there was a request to do away with paper applications. So doing that, that did allow us, and we saw it this year, it probably reduced our errors somewhere between about 90-95% of the application errors that we were getting in from customers. You still get some residency errors, you still get, just other errors, not just whether it's grammatical or completely wrong hunt code. That's the nice thing about the system is it corrects incorrect hunt codes and has you change that within that flow. It increased efficiencies. It takes me fewer temporary employees. Again, I was hiring 6 to 7 temporary employees a year to work errored applications. This year, we ended up hiring 3. I didn't need them all. We ended up just keeping 1. And we're able to work through that process. So we were able to be more efficient and create savings for the agency as it relates to that. We were able to do away with our lock boxes or our mailboxes, so those, which probably saved us per species, and I know it was in the thousands of what we spent each year on those mailboxes that customers would send those in. And then also IDS scanning or printing of those documents. It created better customer service and also the cleanliness of data that we were hoping for. The system is predicated on being error-free, so it allowed us to move more into that realm. And then post-draw payment. Of course, this is the topic that's come up a lot here lately of why we did that. And this is one we discussed. Our hands were tied on that. That was a statutory limit of what we could or could charge for applications at that time. Of course, the future sustainability bill allows us more flexibility as it relates to that now. And we have a committee meeting, I think, as early as next week, on to start to have some of those discussions on what the future looks like, whether we're talking about those type of fees. Not holding the money for 3 months, 3+ months. Again, customer service, 2.2% credit card fee was a huge one that we were looking at. If we'd have run this system, if the only thing we would have done away with was paper applications on every single application that we took in the system, we would have taken in a 2.2, or we would have incurred a 2.2% credit card fee on all those transactions. And in the next slide, I'll show you a good example of exactly that. This also satisfied a Treasury request of reducing the amount of the paper check refunds that we were issuing. We by far issued more than any other agency. I believe at one time I've heard we were paying up to 65% of the core, our financial accounting system for the state. So that will all help out in those savings as it relates to that. And then, of course, to reduce the amount of refunds that we were giving out. Just before I move to this next page and to talk about the intent was not to increase apps or to have this as a money-making adventure. It was solely to be able to go live with IPAWS within the constraints that were there, and to be able to find, knowing we had to go that way to find any savings we could, because a lot of the time frame that we were doing this was actually before the first financial or the future sustainability bill failed. So I mean, we were in that cost savings mode, definitely in my section. So, but for every application that we take in, we immediately through the system incur a $4.25 fee. So a $3 app fee, we incur a $4.25. We automatically lose $1.25 on every single application. So the intent was not to increase how much we're paying. I just wanted to throw that out there. So the example, I used non-resident moose for this. So in 2018, the non-resident moose license fee was $2,211. We had 13,399 non-resident applicants. Of those, we issued 44 licenses. So if we did the math, if all license fees were to have been paid up front, we'd have paid $651,754 in credit card fees. Since all license fees are collected from only successful applicants, we paid $2,140. To go even further with that, I mean, again, the savings was about $650,000 because the total revenue on both, including both resident and non-resident, is $198,000. So we would have lost money having a moose hunt and running a draw if we would not have gone the way we did for this year. And there's other species. I just use moose. It would be very similar for sheep, goat. Because we received so many applications for those other species, I think it would more play out with elk and deer that they're still. Wow. Ouch.
We were already paying attention, but now we're really paying attention.
Pretty sure that one hit me right in the ear. So I think you get the idea behind this slide, so I'll move on unless there's any questions.
Any questions, commissioners?
Sorry. So this slide represents the actual numbers that went through the draw for 2016, 17, and 18, and then the differences. So to show you the difference between 16 and 17, the total percentage of increase was about 3%. That's about normal for CPW. We've seen some spikes from year to year. We've looked at some of the back data. When we went totally limited with deer, there was changes. Of course, you would see that, but nothing like you see in the last one, to where we jumped to an overall through all species a 27% increase in license applications. Questions? So then we broke it down a little bit further so we could understand who was applying. So what you'll get out of this slide is, if you look at the new overall, those customers are new to the system. In other words, we created new accounts for those customers, and we're able to pull those reports to know if they didn't have an account last year, they do this year. So we're able to know what that is. Existing had an existing account at the time of application, and it didn't matter. I mean, it could be that they just had park passes, or that they just had hunting or fishing licenses. It's that they had an account in our system at the time of application. And then we had I had them pull the new to draw numbers also, and that's customers that had not applied in the draw in the last 5 years. So we're just calling those new. I mean, we can call them the R3 customers, whether it's reactivation, return, or just flat out, we added new customers. And we always add new customers every single year. You'll notice, I mean, we'll just look at pronghorn. So if you look at new to draw in 2016, we added about 7,700 new customers to the draw. 2017, 9,000. And then, of course, with the increased app rates in 2018, you'll see that we had 22,641 new to the draw for that year. So if you take new overall and the existing, that would equal the total application rate. So those new customers plus existing, and that gives us our entire group of applications that went through the draw. Sure. Sorry, Commissioner.
So that previous slide was just non-resident. Is this combined total applicants?
This is combined total applicants, all applications that went to the draw, resident, non-resident, youth, adult. It's across the entire.
Okay, just want to make that clarification.
And this slide lets us break it out a little bit further. This was the chance. This was actually the chance of drawing odds for first choice applicants in both 2017 and 2018, and I can explain. So if we look at pronghorn, because it's on the top, you'll see first choice resident adult in 2017 had a 23% chance of drawing their first choice on their application. In 2018, that changed to 19%. First choice non-resident adult in pronghorn went from 8% to 4%. First choice resident youth went from 24 to 21, and first choice non-resident youth went from 7% to 3%. And then you can look at the over all choices, so first through fourth. The overall change over all choices for pronghorn in 2017 went from 18 to 2018, it went down to 15. So we see significant changes, but I mean, I don't think it's some of the grandeur that we heard, and I'm not trying to downplay it. I mean, we had a lot more applications this year than we've received in the past. Again, I want to make sure that the commission understands that, and anyone understands that, you know, that was, I mean, it wasn't intended. We figured applications would go up some. I mean, that's what you would expect with doing what we did. But I don't think that we would have anticipated overall species. We just saw a 27% increase. And looking at, actually, let me see if it's on, no, it's on the, I mean, I don't think we would have anticipated 176% increase in goat applications. I mean, again, those are ones that a lot of folks have never, whether they couldn't afford it or whatever that was. I think it opened up the doors to a lot of folks sitting there saying, you know, it's a $3 application fee. Why would I not apply for it to at least have a choice or start to get my name in that realm? So.
Corey, the director would like to ask you a question.
So Corey, just to clarify so everybody understands, is that you can go back to that 16 to 18 big game draw applications, and you can say for goat, the 166% increase in applications for goat. Then you flip two more slides, and then what you can say is for first choice resident adults, because of that increase in applications, your draw odds changed less than 1%.
It went, that's correct.
correct.
It went from it changed 1.05%. It went from 2% to 0.95.
Okay.
So we took a very hard license and made it a little harder to draw, correct?
Commissioner McDaniel.
How did that change, Corey, in this first year, since doesn't it take 3 points to be eligible? So I would have guessed that in this first 3 years, goat, sheep, and moose would only be changing the draw odds from folks who were already eligible to draw a license.
That's correct. We shouldn't, I mean, looking at certain species, sheep, goat, moose, you shouldn't see any great impact until 2021. That's when this class would enter and actually start competing for those licenses. Looking at the other species, and that's my last slide. It really depends how people are applying to where you determine how it impacts customers, other customers, I guess.
Right.
Again, just to use pronghorn because it's up front. So preference point first choice is all apps with preference point, or all applications with a preference point as their first choice. So if you look at the total pool of applicants of pronghorn, 41,719 had their first choice as a preference point. If you look at preference point only, which is all applications with their preference point as first choice, and they did not even utilize second, third, or fourth choice. So out of the total pool, 37,694 only used that first choice and had it as preference point only. So when you do the math on pronghorn, 49% of those that applied for preference point only. So to sit there or for me to sit up here and try to gauge exactly how that impacts, say, a first-year elk hunter, that's hard for me to do because I really have to go and look at individual hunters, which this starts to do. It lets you see kind of the bigger picture of how folks are applying. But it did create a large year class. I mean, just having the discussion we had yesterday on, you know, the hatchery, I mean, we just created we just had a very successful hatch.
Right.
And created a larger year class of applicants this year, which, depending on how they apply in the future, which would be, is the impact on other hunters. So that was my last slide. If there's any questions or anything I didn't answer or you'd like me to answer.
Commissioners, we're going to have a public presentation from a member of the public following Corey, but what I'd like to do just to close out Corey's presentation is I want to tell you what I have in mind for our August meeting about this and see if it meets with the other commissioners' expectations. So what I wanted to try and do in August is the data will have been out now publicly, and members of the public will have that chance to review it. And what I'd like to do in August is to try and have not anything like yesterday's forum concept, just a traditional, let's invite the public, our hunting organizations to come before us, and we'll talk to them. I'm hoping what I want to avoid is having something like we've had in the past where we've had 30 or 50 individuals come up to the podium. We have no opportunity to engage with them, no opportunity to ask staff to talk to the science that the public may be presenting. So my plan is, and in assuming that it works and that staff agrees, is we'll go to the various organizations, sportsmen and women's organizations, ask them to think about this, ask them to coordinate to the extent they can. There may be very different opinions between different groups, and then ask them to come and talk to us, not just about what Corey has presented to us, but solutions that folks would like to put before us on preference points. Because I think it's easy with preference points for all of us to think that we're not getting as good a deal as we'd like. It's a lot harder then to turn around and say, okay, what would we do to fix it? And so that's what I have in mind for August, if other commissioners feel like that would be useful to do.
I'm
Go
not
ahead,
sure.
Corey.
Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure what the turnout would be. That's leftover and over-the-counter sales right during that same time frame of the commission meeting.
Yeah. Oh, another member of the public? Okay. Commissioners, any thoughts on that? Commissioner Zip.
I like that idea. I guess I wanted to clarify what information is going to be made available to the public. I mean, I know that, you know, there's not the huge changes in chance of drawing or likelihood of drawing, but they certainly are changes across the board that show a pattern, and we did see, because of the new system, a notable increase in applications. So, you know, I don't want to sweep it under the rug. You know, it's I think we heard in customer feedback from some of the most vocal folks out there that disagreed with how the system was run. Certainly, you know, there's some major benefits to doing it this way, as far as not having to pay the full amount up front. I don't know if the non-resident moose was you know, that was probably the extreme situation, given that it was the largest or the second largest increase in non-resident applications. But you know, there's no doubt that there is a efficiency component that this does very well. But I just want to make sure that we're providing the public with good data. We're not trying to skew it, and then giving them a chance, you know, to voice their concerns. You know, obviously, that application fee of $3 is, you know, hopefully by increasing that, we can kind of taper back just the, well, heck, I'm going to apply for everything, you know, at least make people think. But the core of the question, Corey, is what information are we providing to the public on the website that they can see, and also not just data, but hey, this, look at the cost savings. There's, these are some of the reasons why. It's not that we're trying to boost applications and make more money. It's that we're trying to get a process that's efficient and not wasting the agency's money. So kind of inform, educate, but then also we need to listen.
Thank you for the question. To give you there's about three different ways I can answer it. One, as far as raw data like this, of course, this presentation is available on our web. Just to give you an idea, this data was pulled right off our statistics that we post on the web every single year. So customers can look at that just like we did, and we were able to put it in, pivot tables, maneuvered around, have it equate appropriately with what we were trying to show. So that data is out there. And then also, and I think it was an email that we had 2-3 weeks ago with you, Commissioners. I know I've been working with Lauren and Tony on, we were waiting to pull and analyze this data to make sure, it was well understood. And then part of that is going to be putting a fact sheet out on the web to sit there and let folks know why we did what we did in a more both data and from a narrative form as well. So that way that would be out there for the customer to see as well.
Corey, a couple of thoughts on that. This presentation will be available on the web too, correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
Commissioner Haskett.
I just want to say thank you. It's a good presentation, helps us understand all of it, and also thank you for all your times in IPAWS. I'm sure it's been a really stressful job, and we appreciate all of it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Vehil.
Commissioner Haskett, he's a former Marine, so this was not a hard job.
Semper Fi. Commissioner McDaniel.
I think the idea of a white paper or something, a short summary about why the change was made is a great idea to put out there in the web for folks to access wherever it is. Based on other states making similar changes, I would expect that this won't be the only big increase in draw. We'll probably see this for the next 3 years. Frankly, I don't think we should dwell on it too much. It's water underneath the bridge now. Made a policy change. Folks will get used to it, and it does affect draw odds. And we talked about that extensively before the change was made. But it also has great benefit, both to the agency itself and the state, as well as to low-income participants. So I think we just, capture that, and it'll go on.
Commissioner Haskett.
I also think we're not the only state that has seen this kind of increase also. Didn't you say that? Yeah.
Director.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we kind of brought that up. It was anecdotal when last commission meeting, I think the chairman brought it up, and so we reached out to most of the joining states, Idaho, Wyoming, New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah, and to see what they were finding, and they all saw an increase in applications. Some varied, some did do some changes, like Commissioner McDaniel was saying, within the draw system, but so they don't know what it is. I think a lot of folks want to say, well, recruitment and retention is starting to work. I think the economy has a little bit to do with that as well, but nobody can really put their finger on it. Having said that, nobody saw an increase like we did, by far. Somewhere around the $20,000 to $40,000 or 40,000 application rate increases, but they're all excited as well. Seeing the increase in applications means hunting is coming back and it's stronger. But they're certainly watching Colorado to see what has happened with this pay after you're drawn. I know Arizona has that. I think a couple other states too. But so most, at least the ones we asked, were all increases.
Commissioner Vehil.
Just a final comment. Corey, you and your staff deserve a real pat on the back for what you've gone through with the implementation of IPAWS. I know it's hard work, but thanks.
Thank you.
And let me just say, what I'm going to try and put together with staff for August is not rethinking this. It's preference point creep, which is a larger issue than just here. And I'm not seeing anyone objecting, so I will work with staff along the lines that I've said. So, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have a public presentation from Mr. Johnson. Welcome, Mr. Johnson. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. I went a little old school for y'all. Yeah, I've got three things I'm going to hand to you. One of them's a little bit of a simplified version of what Corey just showed you. To answer one of your questions, all the data is available on the website. I'm a data nerd. I know my draw odds in every unit I apply for every year, and that's because it's all available. So I broke that down for you. I apply in 8 or 9 or 10 states every year. I broke down every Western state that I apply in, their draw process, their fees, how their preference points work, and simplified it as best as I could for you. And then finally, just my notes to keep myself on track. I thought if you were driving down the road back home and thought, what did he say about that? Maybe you could have it or use it for scratch paper for the next person or whatever. So those are my notes. I just wanted to start by thanking you for giving me the chance to talk to you. As you may know, I'm not part of the CPW. I'm just an average working guy. My wife and I own a sign business in Gunnison. We live in the valley. I grew up in Alamosa on a barley farm. I'm just an average guy, right? I think if you talked to the local CPW, they would tell you that I'm generally very much an advocate for them. I am not the one that goes to all the roundtables and screams and yells. I have worked with Jay on scoring clinics. I have helped Dan Brow tag fish. I guided fishing for a few years in the valley. I'm generally a very loud supporter of the CPW. Hunting in many of the western states, I feel we're very lucky to have the agency that we do. Though no system is perfect, ours is one of the better ones in the states that I hunt. That being said, in reference to what Corey just presented, the removal of the fronting of tag fees, I feel really was a detriment to the sportsmen that have been participating in the draw prior to this year. And when I approached Jay, I said, you know, I don't come to you with things very often. This one's really important to me. How can I make a meaningful impact or a meaningful presentation? And so here I am. So what I'm going to do for you today, I'm going to try my best to keep it under that 10, 15-minute mark because I think you all are anxious to get home and get back to it. I'm going to break this down into 3 parts. I'm going to start with who I am, why am I the one standing here. Then I'm going to go into some potential issues with and when I talk about the new system, I'm referring specifically to the lack of fronting tag fees and the $3 application fee. And for the purpose of today, I'm really specifically talking about what I call the big 3, sheep, goat, and moose. While much of what I talk about will definitely apply to deer, elk, antelope, we really saw the biggest changes with sheep, goat, and moose. So I'm really talking specifically about those big 3, leaving desert bighorn kind of out on an island because they're kind of their anomaly. Right. I have written down here, you know, complaining without offering a solution is just called whining. I don't want to be the whiner. I really want to come to you with thought out ideas and solutions that maybe we can help us all reach our common goal. So I'm going to try to do that for you this morning. Just a little bit about myself. Like I said, I'm a Valley resident. I've lived in Gunnison since 2001. My wife and I graduated Western. We both grew up on farms in the San Luis Valley. I own a sign shop. This is our 14th summer of making signs. We're not we're not rich by any means, but we make a good blue-collar living. We have a couple employees, and we get to live in the mountains, right? So I consider myself an average Colorado sportsman. Maybe the difference being I am a hardcore hunter. I hunt mid-August through the first weekend of December. I hunt 5, 6, 7 states every year. Last year in Colorado alone, I had 2 deer tags, 2 bear tags, 2 elk tags, 2 antelope tags. I hunted them all. So I didn't fill them all, but I just want to get the point across that I'm deeply invested in the system. I understand it, and that's the case with a lot of states. So I feel like I have a good understanding, and I also feel like I have a very calm voice of reason. I sit on many boards in the Valley. I've sat on the Chamber of Commerce board for 7 years, the Tourism Association board, my church elders board, and I think if you talk to any of those people, they'd tell you I'm a pretty calm, even kilter guy that tries to see both sides. So I feel like I offer a fair and balanced opinion for you all today. So like I said, my question to Jay was, if a sportsman like myself really wants to make a meaningful impact and not just go to the round tables and holler, how do we do that? How do we roll our sleeves up and get dirty and work with you, not against you, to create an outcome that is beneficial to all of us? And he has me here as a starting point. So I tried my best going into today to talk to as many different hunters as I could. I talked to the hardcore guys like myself. Obviously, my inner circle is guys like myself who spend a lot of days in the field. But I have friends that they take their 1 week a year off and they do their elk hunt, and that's all they do. The retiree like my dad who still goes, but he doesn't get after it like he used to. The fathers with the kids that are just starting to enter into the field. And I know it's not necessarily official, but I really did do my best to talk to as many different types of folks honestly and objectively as I could coming into today. And while I'm not trying to claim to represent all sportsmen, I really feel I can give you an honest opinion on what I call the silent majority, the majority of hunters that don't attend these meetings. So that's who I am, and that's why I'm here. Some of the issues with this new system I want to run through, again, we're talking about the big 3. Really, as I see it, there's 2 issues that we're trying to solve, right? We have an incredibly limited resource in sheep, goat, and moose. A lot of people that want to hunt them. How do you equitably distribute the opportunity for that limited resource to the group of people that want to hunt them? And how do you do it in a financially viable way? I mean, I'm a business owner. I was an accounting major in college. I get it, right? We've got to balance both of those issues. I will point out, the resource benefits a lot of people, not just hunters. Many people enjoy these species, but the hunters far and away carry the financial burden of managing these resources, right? I had planned on coming in here today with graphs and charts and showing you all the data and the draw odds and talking with Adrian, who's been great, by the way. She informed me that Corey was going to come with some facts, and then your August meeting will have a lot more of that, and staff is working on that. So I'm going to kind of skip past that. Unfortunately, I couldn't attend the August meeting. I'm going to be out of town, so I'm here today. I have there for you kind of the same numbers that Corey showed you as far as applications, what they were in 2017, what they were in 2018. And like Corey's chart, this is all of them combined. It's non-resident, resident, youth, all lumped in together. But one step I did take, one step further, and I understand that this isn't a complete financial solution to your issue, but at the $3 application fee times the number of new applicants this year, just in reference to the big 3, you had a net increase in about $230,000 in revenue, which I understand doesn't cover the shortfall. If you were to take the 2017 application numbers and times that by a $10 application fee, which I understand has been approved, and you have the opportunity maybe to go to $10, that's a little over my head. But if you took that 2017 number and times it by $10, you actually would have netted quite a bit more than the $3 times the number that you had this year. and I would assume your costs would be lower because you have less applicants. All right, so one of the first issues with the new system, and my question is, are we penalizing the CPW's biggest supporters, your best customers? I would argue that guys and gals that have accumulated weights over, the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years are what I would consider more of your dedicated hunter. So if you're willing to financially invest in weights for sheep, goat, and moose, I think if you study that group of people, you will also find they also buy more tags than the average hunter. They buy more equipment, which means they're contributing more Pittman-Robertson money. That group of hunters is more likely to belong to conservation groups like RMEF or Ducks. What I'm arguing is that the people that this system hurt the most are probably the CPW and the wildlife's best advocates, if that makes sense. And I think they're proving it financially, not just anecdotally. At the same time, this same group of hunters, the vast majority of them cannot afford to go to British Columbia and buy a $30,000 bighorn sheep hunt. That $250 application fee is a drop in the bucket when you consider what it costs to go purchase a hunt for a similar species in places that you can. Okay, my second issue is I think there's a high likelihood that these very rare opportunities, some of them are not going to get utilized. And what's happening is these guys like, oh, it's $3, I'll throw my name in the hat, right? And they don't understand necessarily the physicality of a sheep or a goat hunt or the requirements of packing out a moose. And they're going to show up at the hunt area the day before season, look up at the top of the mountain and be like, and they're going to leave. So there's an opportunity that someone could have had that is going to get wasted just because it was cheap to throw my $3 in the bucket. Another issue that I would almost guarantee is going to happen is I think you're going to see an increase in poaching. And what I mean by that is because these tags are so rare, a guy or person, the vast majority of hunters are great people, right? But some are not. They're going to apply for mom, dad, niece, nephew, wife, cousin, and if and when one of those people draws a tag, they're going to fill it themselves. I would almost guarantee you that will happen. And the unfortunate part is we probably won't see that for 5 or 10 years, right? But it will come, I believe. Another thing kind of along that same point is will the activist groups start to apply for these tags because they are so cheap that they can pocket the tag and save a goat or save a sheep. This isn't just anecdotal. It's happening in Oregon with black bears. There are precedents. And the problem with this is on the surface, people say, well, great, more applications, more money for the division, we'll take it. But what happens is if they start drawing tags, so you increase tag numbers to accommodate the difference, these species we're talking about are so sensitive to 1 or 2 tags. What happens if one year you have a year where all real hunters now draw the tags in a unit that really can't sustain 100% harvest because we've inflated those tags to accommodate the activists supplying. It creates a real management issue, I believe. So that's an issue that I foresee coming as well. Obviously, an issue that Corey talked about and you all are aware of is how does the CPW continue to afford to manage the resource with costs like we're talking about? The North American model of conservation is probably the best model of conservation in the world, and you all are the backbone of that. Without fish and game agencies, that system doesn't exist. But it comes at a cost, and I understand that. I want you all to understand. Inflation raises costs. I get that. Population raises your costs. As population increases, you get more nuisance bear calls, you get more wildlife interactions. It raises your costs, and Colorado is growing. And I think we as sportsmen far and wide understand that things are getting more expensive, and we have to figure that out. My 6th issue on here, and perhaps the most important to me, will my kids ever get to hunt one of the big 3 in their own state? My oldest will not be eligible to apply in the draw till 2020. Will he be behind 60,000 people in 2020 for a moose tag before he ever even gets to start? If the current system continues, that will be the case. And the odds of my children ever getting to hunt in their home state for one of these big three is pretty slim. So that's really close to me. I am honest when I say I would give up my opportunity to hunt if it meant that they got a chance. And then last, if we were to reinstitute the tag fees, I'm sure you all are be confronted with the cost to the hunter. You know, I can't afford the $250, the $3 I could afford. And my argument to you is I believe that's really a non-issue, because if you did draw, you still got to pay that $250. And in today's economy, really, what is $250? Can you even go to the grocery store for $250? I mean, that's the honest truth. And now compare that to the cost of, like I said, buying a $15,000 or a $20,000 or $30,000 hunt for the same species. It's a drop in the bucket. My analogy is, we all own the highways, we all own the roads, but we don't all get to drive Beamers, right? If you want to drive a BMW, you've got to pay for it. The big three they're more expensive to manage, and they are the luxury car of Colorado's wildlife. And if you want the opportunity to hunt, I think you need to have a little skin in the game, is my opinion. My son just went through hunter safety with Dan. I don't know if he's here today, but you know, the thing that they harp all the time is hunting is a privilege, it's not a right. If you want the privilege to hunt these magnificent animals, I think you need to financially be a part of taking care of them. So that's kind of my quick and dirty list of some of the issues that we've created by not requiring the tag fees to be fronted. I just quickly, here's kind of anecdotally some of the people I talked to about solutions. You know, you've kind of got the stay-at-home mom or dad, who they actually make a pretty decent living. The spouse is the breadwinner. Never applied for before, but they easily could have if they wanted to. You've got the hardcore hunter like myself who was going to apply regardless, right? Whatever rules you come up with, I'm going to play the game. But the interesting conclusion from every single one of those guys I talked to, myself included, don't hate the player, hate the game, right? We all applied for a spouse or a cousin or a kid or someone who was not applying before. And that's not because we're trying to cheat the system. It's because these opportunities are so rare and we want to be a part of it. My wife could really care less if she ever hunts a moose or not. But she got a point this year because I want to be a part of the hunt. If she draws, she'll be the trigger lady. But the hunting, the scouting, the packing, that's me, right? She honestly could care less if we go moose hunting for a weekend or we go on a family vacation to Elitch's, right? So some of the numbers we see are a little skewed because I believe there's a lot of people in the draw that make up the new applicants that fall in this category that could really care less if they get the opportunity or not, but their husbands put them in. You've got the guy on the fence, like my dad. He probably could have financially applied in the past but chose not to. He could have if he wanted to, but this year he did. You got a blue-collar working dad. This is kind of the gray area, I feel. An example is a guy I go to church with. He applied for sheep, goat, and moose in the past. He had points built up. As he had kids, they got bigger, life got more expensive. He stopped applying to the point where his points were actually purged, and he got to apply again this year. So that's kind of the one. I would still argue if he draws, the cost far exceeds the $250 of the tag, right? And will he be willing to take more than 2 days off of work to take advantage of this opportunity? And in his case, I don't believe he would. So that kind of gives you an idea of the type of people I talk to. So let's jump into what I feel are some possible solutions. Colorado's application fee is the cheap. Yes, go ahead.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah.
You're at about 15 minutes, so let me give you another few minutes to wrap up.
Okay. Well, let's run through this as fast as we can. You've got to increase your application fees, and I understand that some of that has to go through state legislature, and it's a process. We are the cheapest western state by far and away, bar none, to apply for, but bar none. I would strongly encourage you to require a small game or hunting license in order to apply. Almost every other western state does. Colorado's kind of an either or. If you don't have a small game license, then you pay this preference point fee if you want a preference point. almost every other western state requires both. This one is a must, in my opinion. Have to. The big three need to become once in a lifetime for all male species. There are people in this room that have applied for 25, 30 years for sheep and moose and have not drawn. I know people that drew their second and third sheep tag this year. I know a guy that drew his third goat tag and has never had a weighted point. Don't hate the player, hate the game, right? Sheep, goat, and moose need to become once in a lifetime for male species. Is that once in a lifetime draw or once in a lifetime harvest? You all can figure that out, right? Moving on. I think you need to take a hard look at how weights are applied in the draw, even if it's entirely by perception. The way that your random number is assigned and then divided by your weights, there's this perception that weights do not really give you that much of an advantage in the draw. Again, math whizzes have probably figured this out, but it's a perception, and as we all know in business, perception is key. So maybe look at some of the other states that are outlined there on different ways to apply the weights. But most importantly for me and a lot of the folks I talk to, please figure out a way to reinstate the front of tag fees for the big three. I'm going to skip ahead since we're short on time, but I got a text from one of my fellow hunters yesterday that was reviewing my notes, and I think it summed it up absolutely perfectly. He said, "My thought is that I don't want to see the regular blue-collar guy priced out of the game, but I think it needs to require some degree of sacrifice to trim the field to those who are serious about it. The thought of someone drawing one of these special tags and not caring enough to give it their all just because it was cheap to apply turns my stomach, especially knowing that there are guys out there who would give anything for it and will never draw." That's kind of the summary. I hope that at least opens the door. There's a little bit more in here. I know you're going to talk about this more in August. I just wanted to leave with a question and a thank you. We as sportsmen, I think it's very unclear to a lot of us, perhaps on our own fault. How do we get more involved? How do we roll up our sleeves and work with you, not against you, to accomplish? We're teammates. I think there's misconception that we're opponents, and we're not. We're all trying to accomplish the same thing. We want sustainable wildlife. We want hunting opportunities. But I don't think we know what the process is or what our role is if we really want to step in and work with you to accomplish some of these things.
Well, Mr. Johnson, thank you for the presentation. As far as that last point, and Director, I'll ask you to correct me or one of the other commissioners if I'm off. I mean, we're about to go into the big game.
Your season structure.
Yeah, the season structure. And so that would be a place that naturally you would fit in. That's not the only way to get involved with us, but I think that's the first step I would suggest. And that, what's our timing on that? I know we've talked about it in the meetings.
Again, I just think there's a lot of the silent majority that want to help, that don't want to just scream and yell. I just don't think they know how to. That's my perception in talking to them.
Commissioner Haskett.
One of the big things is money.
Sure.
Are the residents willing to step up and pay a higher fee?
Yes, and that's the point that I made in here that we kind of grazed over. I'm basically saying we as sportsmen are standing here today saying we want to pay for the opportunity. Colorado, the $3 application fee, like as a non-resident especially, $3 to apply, is probably $100 cheaper to apply than any other state in the West. Colorado is so crazily underpriced compared to any other state. It's crazy. And now we have some of the worst draw odds in the West with the most opportunity. We have more moose and sheep and goats than most Western states.
Commissioner Vigil.
Mr. Johnson, I appreciate that you talked to some individuals, but have you met with any of the hunting organizations like Big Game Forever or Colorado Bow Hunters Association or any of them?
I have, we kind of pulled this together in the last couple of weeks, I'll be honest with you. I have talked with the local GWA that's kind of reformed, and I would submit to you that I get, you know, Epic Outdoors, the CBA. I am a member of the CBA. I get their journal. I get Eastman's Hunting. I get all of those. And the vast majority of them have had articles that will pretty much mirror this sentiment. I mean, across the board. This is not just my opinion. But no, I haven't sat down and met with them.
Well, I do appreciate that you provided us with some possible solutions. I think preference points is a big issue, and do you hold a lot of preference points for St. Moose?
I do. I actually I drew my goat tag this year. It took me 14 years to draw. But I will submit to you, like I talked to these guys, I applied in what I would consider to be one of the least desirable units because I saw this coming, and I felt like if I didn't draw in the next 3 years, I was going to be in trouble. So I get to hunt. I'm not trying to be ungrateful, but I'm not hunting in the unit that I've applied for 13 years.
Commissioner Zimmerman.
Thanks very much for putting all this together and for taking the time to come before us on a weekday. I really appreciate the time and certainly all the data collection that's helpful. It sounds like some of these references that you made to folks you've been speaking with are perhaps, and I know Commissioner Behill talked about some of the RMEF and some of the organization groups, but it sounds like some of these folks are avid sportsmen that aren't necessarily, you know, incredibly active in some of the organized sportsman groups. What is, you've taken it upon yourself to engage with our local CPW officers. What are some ideas on the best ways that we can more actively communicate with some of your non-organization membership sportsmen?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I wish I had a magic answer for you, because let's be honest, part of the onus is on us, right? If you want to be informed, you've got to find the material. It's there. And I don't think it's a Gunnison problem. I think it's a state issue. You go to round tables and 8 people show up. You know what I mean? So I don't know. Certainly social media and the internet is the new news outlet, you know, but I don't know.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Next up, we have former Commissioner Phelps, I believe, would like to address us. Welcome. Always good to have a former member of the commission.
Brad Phelps, fourth generation, Gunnison County native. I hunt a little bit. I was on the commission when we carried 20-pound three-ring binders. Kind of got envy over those little deals. When I was on the commission, it absolutely infuriated me how much money it cost Division Wildlife to refund money. Okay, it was horrible back then. It's still there today. I was all excited about the $3 that we were finally going to quit losing money, and then he burst my bubble that we lost $1.25 on every app. You know, I did not see that coming. I thought $3 would do it without the credit card fees and everything. We gotta stop the bleeding. I highly encourage, the way I understand it, is statutorily you can raise resident app fee to 10, non-resident to 20. I say you do that for 19, not to generate money, to recap the losses for the last 40, 50 years, okay? We've been losing money on the draw process forever. We got to get that caught up. Back in the early 2000s with 3-ring binders, we couldn't be public about it because we didn't want to embarrass state government, how wasteful it was to write a goddamn warrant class voucher for the $32 elk tag, you know? That leads me to the transparency. The statistic page on your website is awesome. We know the draw odds, trust us. We got this draw odds deal down. Go ahead and put a statement in there exactly how much the draw has been costing with the old system, and get it out there that it cost us $1.25 this year. There's still a vast majority of your public out there who thinks that you're gaining interest on their money, and we've all known forever that that's statutorily prohibited. But transparency, it's 2018, we have the website, we no longer have paperless apps. This is what we do, folks. So get it out there and say it, and that'll make it more acceptable. You know, the credit card fees, oh my God. Real quick, we also got to be realistic here, people, that sheep and goat and moose are never in a lifetime tags for the vast majority of the people who apply. Let's go back here in 2017. You basically, from all their graphs to summarize, you're gaining 1,000 bighorn sheep apps a year. 1,000 more people apply every year. That's what's been happening prior to this change. So last year in 2017, you had 17,739 guys for 390 some odd tags. It's pretty simple. That's a never in a lifetime tag for the vast majority of the people who applied in 2017. So yes, it was a kick in the guts when I saw that 40,993 for this year. Hardcore, I took my muskrat money across Highway 50 to the part of the store to buy a $50, what do they call those now, that you had to buy at the post office because they wouldn't take checks. Money order. I didn't take enough to pay the post office the $1.80 or whatever. Thank God I knew the postmaster. I got in. I started for bighorn sheep in 1979. I have never drawn one. I'm at 35 years for bighorn sheep. I'd be at more, but I took a couple years out to draw goats because back in the olden days, hunting age was 14, not 12, and you could only apply for one or the other. Okay? I don't know why I decided I wanted to kill a goat, but I took 3 years out to kill a goat. I am one of the very, very fortunate few. On a whim in 1990, I dropped out and put in for desert sheep, and I drew it, so I've killed the desert. But then, since then, for the last 27 years straight, boom. And then, I don't know if anybody can answer this question when it comes to moose. What year did we give the first 2 bull moose tags in Walden? Was it 85 or 87? You know, so if it was 85, I've been applying for moose for 33 years. If it was 87, I've been applying for 31. I don't know how you can solve this. You can't lose money. You can't lose money. You got to stop the bleeding. You got to try to recoup some losses. I encourage you to go to the $10 and the $20 ASAP, but you can't control the number of applicants with money. Hell, for me, let's do $500 tags and make it non-refundable. I'll apply because I'm invested. That isn't a viable option. However, as a guy who did get taken, have a double-digit sheep points, yanked away and taken to 0 21 years ago when we went with the new weighted system, now that we made another dramatic change, I would say the increase is dramatic. Any argument there? That our application rate, that's dramatic. Maybe it's time to take a look at that weighted system and possibly, basically in the weighted system, and there's guys here to answer it better than me, long-term guys like me at 35 years don't get that much of a preference. We really don't get that big of an advantage in the draw. I think that there may be time to look at the draw all the way across, at least for the big 3. Then another thing that kind of panics me a little bit is the lesser ones, the second season deer tags. I think you're going to start seeing point creep in those too, and that worries me. For example, bear in 2017 for all these units, 134 first choice applicants, like I think they gave 125 tags. Very few people didn't draw. That jumped to 216. Man, you know, when it starts taking preference points to hunt black bear, because there's not a shortage of black bear, a lot of black bear die in this dumpster out here in this hotel because our little kids push the button in the compactor and compact cubs. Paul Meter will back me up on that. Man, that's scary when you can't get a bear tag. So this was a dramatic change. It made a dramatic change. Maybe we can look at the draw odds. Maybe try to come up with a system like another state. Yeah, that's surely 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Commissioners, any comments or questions? Commissioner Zip. Thank you.
I have to admit I'm not a big game hunter, but I just want to acknowledge that, you know, some of the points made today by the guest speakers, and you know, put the onus on us to look at, you know, how can we make it better. It's never going to be perfect, but you know, how can we make improvements and make those improvements as quickly as possible? And I think some of the suggestions, especially, well, by both speakers, I think have great potential, and especially with these three, the big three, you know, I think that possibly charging those upfront tags for those limited animals may make sense, and I think there's solutions out there. We just need to, between the application fees and you know, what we're limited to by statute, I think there's solutions out there. We need to keep the doors open and make sure we're communicating with folks like Ryan, and I think we'll have an even better, more successful draw in 2019.
Thank you, Commissioners. Any other comments or questions? Great. Next up, a little off agenda here. Mr. Jones, are you still here? I apologize, we weren't able to get to you with the fire alarm yesterday. We did speak a lot about OHV, so I wanted to give you that chance today.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Director Broscheid. Sorry for the confusion with the fire alarm yesterday. I got waylaid outside and probably bringing something back I should have talked about yesterday, but I appreciate your courtesy on this issue. I just wanted to address our concerns. A little bit about myself before I talk about that. I'm currently serving as the diversified representative on State Trails in Congressional District 4. I've been around the program for decades probably at this point. I don't want to date myself, but you know, and it's something that we've, both from the user group and from the State Trails Committee perspective, really tried to address proactively, is this permit/registration issue. For those that are not aware, there are really two different categories of OHV registrations, we'll call them, and the one would be a registration where it is a non-street legal vehicle from somebody that lives in the state. Those traditionally are this big stickers that you see on most of the units, and then there's a permit process that is allowed or provided for either a vehicle that's in state, registered, you know, traditionally a dual sport motorcycle, a Jeep, a full-size vehicle, something like that, that wants to be used on a trail. And my understanding of the discussion yesterday was that we would amend the permit placement requirements to bring them into consistency with the OHV registration display requirements. And just to make them more visible, make more sense, make them so everybody's looking in the same place, because currently, just as a result of some oversight issues, a couple of years ago, the registrations were moved to a more visible location, but the permitting stickers were not. So that was kind of the intent of my understanding of the discussion yesterday. Our concerns about expanding that discussion into something about larger stickers, more visible stickers, would be, first off, permits are on plated vehicles predominantly in the state. So these vehicles have a license plate issued by Department of Transportation, in Colorado, or a lot of the out-of-state units are also plated in their home states for a variety of reasons. So we're really kind of looking at an issue that from our perspective is resolved. A permit is on something that's got a full DOT license plate, either a motorcycle plate or a full-size, truck plate. So the issues with identification, I'm sensitive to it. It's something that's always been there. But when we're talking just permits, it's got a license plate on it that would be accepted for identification pretty much anywhere in the country. So I think our concerns about having a discussion about a bigger sticker, where's our benefit here? And identifying those that choose to behave badly on public lands or private lands or wherever. Also wanted to just kind of give you some background that, from the last several years, we've had a lot of discussions about OHV registrations, OHV permits, either implementing them into the IPAWS system, that you could do the kind of one-stop shop. You get your fishing license, get your ATV sticker, that kind of stuff. There was some legislation that was floated around about, you know, expanding the size of them, that kind of stuff. And the cost became prohibitive pretty quickly on making bigger stickers from, you know, either buying them at Walmart and getting the traditional kind of hunting and fishing tag type of a you know, there was discussions about could we even print a sticker in that type of a machine or point of sale type situation. And I remember, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. There was a significant cost if those types of stickers would have been available at those types of venues, you know, which is concerning for us from our community. We'd like to see every dollar we possibly can going back onto the ground to provide for good management crews, maintenance crews, addressing issues that are really, you know, out there on the ground. And, you know, paying Walmart another $2-3 on a sticker is not doing that. That's just the kind of administrative overhead that we'd like to avoid, you know, and that kind of stuff. So it's something that's been looked at from, I think, several years, and you know, it's expensive, and we don't particularly see the benefit of you know, larger stickers on vehicles that already have license plates. If it's good enough for the state patrol on I-25 for identification purposes, you know, that license plate should serve the same function in the backcountry. So other than that, I would welcome any questions.
Commissioners, questions or comments? Commissioner Zip.
I understand, you know, your point with vehicles that are licensed, but there's still a significant number of vehicles that are not licensed that are simply registered.
Correct.
That have the tag. So are you opposed to something that would?
Well, that is something that we several years ago started. We called it the OHV Law Enforcement Pilot Project with State Trails. We devoted about $500,000 to try and get a grasp on, you know, what's the scope of what's really going on there. And as part of that project, we funded professional law enforcement people with the Forest Service, BLM, Parks and Wildlife, and then for a couple of years, there was a couple conservation groups that were involved, and then there was kind of a public input process in that project. And as a result of those I think it went 4 years or 5 years, because it kind of transitioned quite a bit throughout its the existence of the pilot project. Those professional law enforcement people went out and did law enforcement. Some years they were, you know, we were targeting, you know, heavy use weekends. It would be Labor Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July. Other years we kind of went to hotspot areas, Taylor Park, or Sandhills up outside of Walden, that kind of stuff. And we really tried to tinker with the law enforcement project, or the pilot, to make sure that all of the concerns were vetted and reviewed. And the only additional thing that the law enforcement folks that were brought in under the pilot had to do was record every contact that they made in the backcountry. So rather than going, well, we saw one person behaving badly, it now was designed to give us some context around, you know, okay, we did see one person behaving badly. How many other people did we see in the backcountry that were doing everything right? And that was an important, I think, from just understanding the question and the challenge. You know, what is the real percentage? And after 4 or 5 years, we had contacted about 100,000 users in the backcountry on ATVs and that kind of stuff. And one of the major problem was people weren't buying tags, about 2%. And then a little less than 2% were actually either off trail, loud exhaust, no spark arresters, those kinds of things. You know, so these were, again, professional law enforcement folks that were, you know, fully trained, you know, there was no anything, you know, but that would be impairing the credibility of that information. And we're pleased to see 2%. I think that's pretty consistent across whatever spectrums of society. You know, and I think it speaks volumes to the fact that this may not have been the issue that everybody thought it was on the front end, was as the program kind of evolved, the Forest Service actually stopped the program. They didn't come back the last 2 years for additional law enforcement funding or folks or anything like that, which again kind of made us go, okay, maybe this is not, you know, are there people out there doing bad decisions in the OHV world, in the hunting and fishing world? Drive down I-25, there's people making bad decisions all the time. It's not what we found with the study of you know, 50% or 60% or anything like that. So you know, we're comfortable with that information. We worked really hard with CPW, the Forest Service, and BLM to really kind of understand what the scope of what we were dealing with was out there. And you know, I mean, there's still concerns. But you know, I can tell you, we went out a couple times with some of the law enforcement guys that were out there, especially with CPW. Yeah, if you were doing something stupid, those boys had the skill set and the equipment to run you down. If they had chased me, yeah, they would have had me in about 3 seconds. So, you know, if there was somebody out there with a loud bike or a loud piece of equipment or whatever, they'd find you real quick. And they definitely had the ability. It wasn't like you were outrunning them. Those were really good riders on really good equipment, and they could get you real quick. So hopefully that addresses.
You know, I guess simply what I was looking for is why would there be opposition to being able to more clearly identify vehicles that aren't plated? And I understand that where we have enforcement out there, they're going to do their job regardless of, you know, they're going to be able to make that contact. But in the vast majority of instances, there isn't law enforcement of any agency on the ground. And I think the point of that discussion yesterday was for those vehicles that are not licensed, for a common, you know, hiker or fellow motorcycle rider, they can take a picture, they can identify it, and then they can send that information to law enforcement. So that's the point I'm making, is that those vehicles that aren't plated, if we can identify them easier, why would that not be a good thing? Can you answer?
Yeah, I can absolutely answer, because we had quite a few local sheriffs involved in the discussions around the pilot program. And the concern is most of the state of Colorado lives along the Front Range. They come to the West Slope or wherever to recreate. And number one, simply the picture, most of the people that are out riding are wearing gear, so you can't identify the operator. So the violation goes to the operator of that vehicle, not the vehicle. So we have trouble with that. And that was one thing the sheriffs brought up. But also, if they don't capture you at the time that this event is occurring, they would have to go serve you with your ticket in Denver or Fort Collins or where the Front Range. And the sheriffs were pretty blunt on the fact that they're not doing it. They don't have the resources to go issue a ticket for something like that. They just don't have the money. So.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. I've lost total control of the agenda and timing, so.
I'm sorry, I completely killed my 3 minutes.
No, you're not. I'm glad to always have the public comment, and I'd rather lose control of the timing than cut you off, but I appreciate it.
Thank you for your consideration.
You bet. Ivan, I think you're up next. Mr. James from Colorado Bowhunters.
Well, formerly from Colorado Bowhunters, now I'm representing Colorado Backcountry Hunters and Anglers.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. I misread your
Thank you, Chairman Howard and members of the commission. I'm here today on the same ATV issue. I own an ATV. And it's licensed. Well, it's not. It has a sticker. And in fact, I think 3 years ago, I actually took it on a state trail. Mostly I use it on my farm for farm work. So I have equipment tied on the front, I have equipment tied on the back of it. I can understand concerns about licensing that gets in the way of equipment or equipment gets in the way of licensing. But I certainly do support, and BHA supports, a readable license, a readable sticker that people could observe. I'm a hunter, I'm a hiker, I do a little bit of fishing, and I have seen abuse in both hiking and hunting situations. And I would, in my judgment, I would probably say that 2% is a little lower than what I experience. Of course, I'm not wearing a uniform, so maybe I see a little bit different than someone in a uniform would see. But I'd say it's a little more than that. And typically when somebody is abusing an ATV, they're doing it so fast that unless you have something a little bigger, you're not going to read it. And so we fully support particularly everything that Mr. Willoughby said yesterday in terms of a readable, observable sticker on ATVs. And thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioners, any comments or questions for Mr. James before we move on? Great. Next up, we have a game damage claim appeal. Not sure who's to come up on that. Mr. I think they're. If we're not ready to go, I have some other things I could do.
Good morning. I apologize for that.
It's okay.
Good morning, Commissioners, Director Broscheid. My name is Garrett Watson. I'm the new Game Damage and Commercial Parks Manager for CPW, and I'm here to present to you Game Damage Claim number 09-Y18-02, claimant Mr. Tom Maniotis for sheep loss caused by bear. Staff has recommended the denial of this claim based on the claimant not providing his final paperwork within the 90-day period as outlined in the regulations, Chapter 17. In particular, he did not submit his proof of loss form, his itemized loss statement, or his documentation to prove the value of his loss within that 90-day time frame. We do note that the claimant did call our DWM 38 days after the 90-day deadline to ask about his claim, in which he stated that he had already submitted it, but nothing was received by our office at that time. Our DWM went ahead and gave the claimant another set of paperwork to file the claim as soon as possible. This paperwork wasn't received for another 45 days later, so totaling 83 days after the 90-day deadline when the paperwork was finally submitted. We do acknowledge that the claimant did incur damage to his livestock caused by bear, but due to him not submitting his paperwork until 83 days after the deadline, and the fact that he's not new to the program, he's filed many claims in the past that he's gotten paid for, and a history of not completing his paperwork, we felt it reasonable to recommend the denial of this claim and refer it over to the Commission as an action item for your review. If you guys have any questions specific to this claim, I have District Wildlife Manager Gene Abram here and Area Wildlife Manager Lyle Seidner here that can answer more specific questions if need be. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Commissioner Vigil.
I do have a question. Tell me exactly where Oak Creek is. Is it a difficult place to get mail? Because it seems like in what we've seen here, we didn't get the whole story of the damage claim. But I realize that bears did kill the sheep and the valuation was okay. But the mail process in Oak Creek, is that a little community where mail is not always handled appropriately?
I think Lyle probably could answer that question a little bit better for me.
Good morning, Lyle Seidner, Area Wildlife Manager, Hot Sulphur Springs. Actually, I should mention that Mr. Maniotis is here as well, so he could also address any questions that you might have. There is an issue where Mr. Maniotis maintains residence in Oak Creek and in Fort Lupton, so that may contribute to the mail issue. Oak Creek, actually Oak Creek is outside of my area, but Mr. Maniotis runs sheep in Area 10 out of Steamboat, and then also in our area. So I can't answer specifically about the mail situation in Oak Creek.
Why don't we have Mr. Maniotis come to the podium if he's prepared? Welcome, sir.
Good morning. I'm glad to have the opportunity to present my case here, I guess, and stuff. As far as the mail, my wife Leslie mailed the claim. We didn't know that it hadn't been received until I think it was December sometime when I'd called Gene Abrams about it, and he checked into it and said it had not been received. So they sent out some different correspondence and stuff. In the meantime, we have our summer operation in Oak Creek, our winter operation. We moved to the eastern slope to Fort Lupton. We cannot change our mailing address. Our permanent mailing address is Box 156 Oak Creek. If we try to change all our correspondence, twice a year, it becomes impossible. So what the post office in Oak Creek agrees to do is to hold our mail for a week and ship it all in one box to us. I think every Wednesday or Thursday they ship that out to us. So when we received the other correspondence, of course we were like 10 days out after it had been sent. So we got that done in a timely manner and sent it back. Where the original paperwork went, I have no idea. All I know is that Leslie had sent it. We filled out the appropriate paperwork. Gene brought me all the appropriate forms and stuff. I indicated to him at that time that we were going to file the claim because of the value of the livestock. I think it was said that we failed to finish up some other paperwork in previous years, and the reason for that is the claims were so minute. It's not worth it, folks. It's not worth to go through all that paperwork for $400 or $500 or $600. We realize we're taking a risk when pasturing the sheep out on the forest and on our private land, and the bear and lion kill them and stuff. But with small claims like that, it's really not worth messing with it. This got to be a little overbearing. They came in and they took one bear, and it didn't stop the killing. They just continued and continued and continued. So that's when we decided that we needed to file a claim. We're a small operation, and quite frankly, $4,000 isn't a lot of money. And once the bear get in the sheep, we've got to hire extra help. It's not what they kill, it's what they scatter all over the forest. So we've got to hire extra help to go up and help gather the sheep. We've got to be there on a daily basis, travel expense and stuff. And it just got to the point where we needed help to recoup the losses. So I guess if you got any other questions, I know there was a little concern over the value of the lambs. We sell our lambs directly to Whole Foods stores. We don't sell live lambs. I think the weight on the application there said 76 pounds. That is a dressed weight. That is not a live lamb weight. Our live lamb weights average anywhere from 150 to 180 pounds. And them lambs will dress 50% at the packing house. That is what we sell to Whole Foods, the boxed dressed weight. So like a 76-pound average there, I seen somewhere that is the dressed weight. That's not the live weight of the lamb. They pay us $4.25 a pound for the dressed lamb. So I guess if you got any other questions and stuff, I'd be glad to answer them if I can.
Commissioner Vigil.
I do have a question, Mr. Maniotis. What do you do personally, or your hired help, to prevent game damage by bears?
Well, we've got obviously we've got a sheep herder with every bunch. We've got guard dogs with every herd. I think in that herd where we have the most trouble there, Timber Mountain on Rabbit Ears, we have 4 livestock guardian dogs with them. at all times. The herders bunch the sheep at night, try to keep them together so that the dogs are effective and stuff. But it's got to be to the point the last few years, and I don't know why, but the bear don't seem to be as afraid of the people and dogs as they used to be. And I don't know what that is, if that's being in proximity to Steamboat and they're used to all that or what. But years ago, we were lucky if we seen a bear all summer. And they were killing sheep and stuff, but we never seen a bear. Now, the herders are having confrontations with them early in the morning in the sheep. We had one herder there, it's the same boy that's there this year. 3 years ago, he said the bear would stand on his hind legs and growl at him when he'd go to the sheep in the morning. He was ready to quit me. And finally, Parks and Wildlife got a hold of Fish and Wildlife, and they come in and took the bear, the big bear. So the bear just don't seem to be as afraid as they used to. They're more, I don't know. But we do everything we can to prevent the kills, because obviously we don't want to lose them. But there's just so much we can do. I mean, and the bear population is just increasing and increasing and increasing. We've seen a lot of bear this spring. One of our main concerns is, due to the drought this year, I've seen all the berries drying up already up there. We're not going to have a berry crop, choke cherries, harvest berries, or anything else. And it's going to be a problem this fall, definite problem. The bear are going to be searching for food and consequently going to be attacking the livestock. We're hoping for the best, but it doesn't look good to me.
Well, in agriculture, we hope for the best, and we usually get the worst, because if it's not the weather or predators, the government will get you. So, and in this case, maybe the post office. I'm real sympathetic to ag producers who are suffering not only game damage, but the whole state is having problems. In the southern part of the state, we're not growing any hay because of the drought and the lack of water. So for ag producers or ranchers and cattlemen, prices are going to skyrocket on hay, and most of them are having to, across the state, having to reduce their herds. And I'm really sympathetic. And I understand that the problem is because paperwork didn't get to our agency in time. And I just have a hard time agreeing with denial of a case on something like this, because I realize we have to do our paperwork on time, and we have a 90-day grace period. It's like the Department of Motor Vehicles. They give you a 30-day grace period, and then you're penalized because you have to take the test all over again. So.
It sounds
the problem was I should have contacted Gene before that, and I didn't. I waited until it was December or something before I contacted him.
I think in the future you got to stay on top of that. Even if you have to hand deliver it, if you're in the area. I realize if you're back and forth between Fort Lupton and Oak Creek, that's a chore.
I think that...
It sounds suspiciously like a motion, Commissioner.
I would, I'm kind of torn between this, because we do have a procedure, and in this case, you violated it. You and the post office. And like I said, if something doesn't get you, the government will. I think you need a penalty for being late, but I would deny a portion of the claim, maybe $3,000, and Mr. Maniotis can eat the rest.
So, Commissioner Vigil, you're making a motion to pay $3,000 of the underlying claim?
Yes.
I'm looking. Commissioner Zip.
I just wanted clarification. I thought staff said that Mr. Maniotis had placed previous claims, and there was a history of late paperwork. Is that the case, or did I misunderstand that?
Why don't we have staff come back up to the podium, please, so we can capture it on the record.
Good morning, I'm Gene Abram, the DWM up there. Tom has put in claims for multiple years since we've been there. Last year he did put in, or we started the initial paperwork for a claim. Paperwork didn't get completed or put through, but he had some other personal health issues at that time which could have contributed to that. In years past, I have records indicating, and I think it was 2009, he did put in for a claim. I ended up going through the process of doing a denial on that claim as well, due to the fact that paperwork wasn't issued in a timely manner or complete. That claim was later paid by the commission. So that happened then, so there's 2 years. Also in it's here, I just have to find it, hang on. To you guys' question earlier about what Tom does as far as trying to stop damage caused by bears. This past year, one of the bears that APHIS came in and took care of is actually a bear that his herder did shoot. He did hit it and wounded it, it just didn't go down. So he does do something to try to prevent that damage. It just doesn't always work in the dark.
And to clarify, I guess, so just curious if how many, so it sounds like so far there's only been one prior claim that was actually paid, and that was?
No, he's had other claims before I was here that did get paid as well. I think you've had 2, if not 3, that have been claimed. I've been in that district since 2004.
Okay.
Commissioner Haskett.
Thank you. How many of those have been late? If he has a history of being late, that's my biggest concern.
I'd have to read the specifics on those claims. The denial that occurred in 2009 was based upon late paperwork.
Since he does this every year, you should know the process of doing it, and it seems like this was done, the last damage was in August, but there wasn't any question of it until December of whether the paperwork was received or not.
I made a phone call to him in September. I want to say the 12th, I believe is when it was, calling him just to find out when he was going to ship sheep so we would know when that claim would end. At that time, he said he had shipped them the week before. So then I told him, I said, okay, well, get me your paperwork and we'll submit the claim. So.
I mean, I don't think there's any question of the damage itself. I think it's just the policy of following the paperwork. And
correct. Yes.
I think that's something we really want to work on, is making sure you get your paperwork in on time.
So Commissioners, I have a motion that has not been seconded on the floor. That we, unless there's, okay, so we have a second. Would you like to have we should probably have a discussion about this, I think, unless we're done, which case I can call for a vote. Oh, Commissioner McDaniel.
Is there a history, maybe you could give me, around adjustment of claims? I mean, just, I don't know, is that an arbitrary amount, 3,000, 75%? Do we typically do this on this kind of issue where paperwork is not completed on time in violation of our policy?
I can recall one instance while I've been on the commission where we did cut back a claim. It wasn't about predators, it was an elk claim, as I recall.
We did one on bees.
Yeah, we did.
Bear damage on bees, and that was a case, I think, of a question. I was not happy with the DWM's work on the claim because it was 2 different areas, and because of that, I made a motion to split the payment, and it passed. Going back farther, I couldn't tell you. Like, my concern right now is that agriculture is taking it pretty hard all around, and I just don't like to add to that burden on egg producers. Seeing as I'm a representative of the egg community, I understand damages like this. And it was our wildlife that did the damage. There's no denying that. It wasn't mischievous kids or something out there. It was bears that got the sheep.
Any further discussion? I'll just comment too, I appreciate the way staff has handled this. I think you followed the law perfectly and then brought it to us to make a decision like this, and I think, I myself think that is exactly how we should do these types of questions. So I appreciate that. In any action we take, I wouldn't want staff to think we weren't supporting them in that. So, Commissioner Zimmerman.
I'll just say, I mean, we've all paid a bill late, right? And received a penalty of, you know, oh man, now I got to pay an extra, you know, $100 or whatever because I paid the bill late. But you know, the amount of time and money to drive from Oak Creek or even Fort Lupton all the way over to Crested Butte, that's, you know, that would have been a lot easier to just drive up to the CPW office and drop off the paperwork. So I like Commissioner Vihill's suggestion of hand-deliver paperwork in the future, and I think you asked the questions I had, which were, you know, making sure that you're doing everything you can to avoid encounters, you know, with bear and any other predators. So that's my only comment.
Counsel, can I ask you a question? Do I need to ask for public comment on this? It's a game damage appeal, so.
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Zip.
No, I was just going to make a motion to second.
We have a second from Carrie.
Oh, you have a second already, okay.
But thank you, though. Appreciate it. Adrian, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Haskett?
Yes.
Hauser?
Yes.
McDaniel?
Yes.
Vihill?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Zip?
Yes.
And Chairman Howard?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Maniotis, I would just caution you that, you know, there'll be a new commission at some point, but I wouldn't think that if you're late in the future, you'll necessarily get the same outcome. So, but we do appreciate you coming over and presenting to us. Thank you, staff, as well.
Thank you.
And I'd also like to compliment staff for handling these claims, because it's never easy. And so they do a good job, and I realize that they were following the process. And part of the process is any game damage denial comes to the commission for review and sometimes sympathy.
So now that I've really lost control of time, I'm going to really lose some more of it. So if we could have Mr. Vilsack come to the podium, I'd be grateful. And is Mr. Lopez here in the room? We need to get him ready because he'll be next time.
Yes, sir.
Doug, I just, you know, as we've talked about, we wanted to publicly thank you. I know we've thanked you very much, but one thing the director and I never talked about publicly was the alternative for this summer and what we were going to be talking about, which was really very ugly, involving selling assets and things. And I know that was not how we approached the legislature, but it was greatly on my mind, and you and all the other folks that worked on it at CPW and DNR have really changed the course of the agency. And so we wanted to publicly thank you. I'm going to invite other commissioners to say what they would like, but I got to see you in action on the Capitol just because of where I live, and the effort was unbelievable, and we are so grateful for you representing us.
Thank you. No, sure, and it was a group effort. I think all the sportsmen's groups, parks groups, everybody that was involved, and I think certainly over the work that we've done over the past 2 years with the legislature, CPW and just the department has really benefited from this as well. I think you saw that in the unanimous vote out of the Senate, and certainly strong vote out of the House too. We've got a really good relationship with those folks now, and certainly still challenges with some of the work that we want to do, and kind of getting back to the work that the agency wants to accomplish, including what we'll hear from, I think, over the next few minutes, just about some of our conservation efforts. But we've got good lines of communication, so hopefully we can now think about how we can spend some of these new funds wisely and think about the next steps for the agency.
So let me give you one of our challenge coins.
Oh, sure.
I wanted to shake your hand. Mr. McDaniel will give me a problem if I don't give it to you in the correct way.
Thank you. Thank you so much. These things are great. And yeah, looking forward to what we might have coming next. Obviously, the discussion yesterday afternoon was interesting, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for how we engage new users in the agency as well. So, thank you.
I don't, are we, Director, are you signaling you want to say something?
Yeah, I would love to if you'd let me. Please. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, Doug hit on it, and I get to do a little bit here and in my previous life of working in the legislature, and you hit on it. It's relationships, and the unique part, what Doug does is Doug didn't build a relationship with him among the legislators. He built it among the department, the division, and all of the staff with the legislators, and that's an important distinction that he really led us to an area of credibility with the legislature, and it's only us who can blow it at this point, and we won't. But it's, that's really key, and that was something unique that I've worked with a lot of lobbyists that Doug brings is really different, and it's leaving this agency in a lot better position, and that's not easy to do because we were not in the best of view of a majority of legislators, and you've turned that around, obviously with the votes, but it's what goes on behind the scenes for those of you who've been there, sitting in those offices of leadership and hearing, and then listening and then reacting. And so I wanted to thank him for that. That's a unique skill, Doug, and we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Commissioner Vigil.
Doug, I was fortunate to be able to testify at the Senate Finance Committee, and I was impressed because I thought that was our biggest hurdle to get through that group. But the forces you marshaled to testify was amazing. I mean, volunteers and just a huge amount of volunteerism showed up at that late night session. I think we left the Capitol about 8:30 that evening, and but it was well worth it, and I was glad to participate in that event.
No, that was a great hearing, and I think that really set us on our way. There were some stunned looks even the next day when we were starting to talk to other legislators about kind of moving the bill forward to hear that we had made it out of Senate Finance 5-0. I think for anything, especially fee increase, that was a little bit unheard of. And I think that hearing was especially great just because we did have, groups from both the wildlife side of the agency and the park side of the agency. And, we haven't been CPW for that long, and it was great to see kind of all folks coming together in a joint cause that night. So that was a tremendous meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Did we find Mr. Lopez? Yes, I would like you to come up.
Very often I get to be up here in a full room.
It's my chance to cross-examine you.
Oh, no.
For those of you that don't know, I think most of the commission knows, but Nick will no longer be representing us. He's relocating to Vermont, to Burlington. And so I wanted to give him an opportunity to thank him. He has been a great source of counsel to me, and I think to the commission. He also has delivered an amazing result in a case that is really one of the most important things we do, is to go after folks that don't follow the law, and we offer them every chance, and then sometimes I guess it's necessary to go all the way, and so we get a great result like that. I think the message is much bigger than just that individual case. So I'm personally very grateful for that. I'm very sorry to see you go. I wish you the best. And I also have a challenge coin for you, and I'll just invite other commissioners while I'm walking up to comment.
Well, Nick, I don't know. I don't know why you would leave Colorado for Vermont. Most people leave Vermont for Colorado, but I'm really confused by this whole, just going there to visit, or?
Say that again?
Are you just going there to visit, or? Just kidding.
Few-year visit, yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll come back to visit Colorado, and we'll be happy to see you when you do. And thank you very much for all of your counsel. Obviously it was a tough transition. We've had Tim Monahan for so long, and so really appreciate both Nick and Jake for your counsel. But we'll miss you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck in the Granite State That's all it's known for in Colorado.
I think that's New
That's
Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
I did.
I don't know
They're all
what it
pretty
really
close.
is, so I'm looking it up.
It's pretty close, though,
There's
Commissioner.
granite everywhere. I mean, we have more granite than the Northeast does, but
Oh, good to know.
anyhow, it's been a pleasure working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And if I just may say, you know, it has been a true pleasure working for this agency and this commission. The work that this commission does and that the agency conducts every single day is so important. You all should be very proud of the work you do. I will forever be proud of the small piece that I got to participate in with each of you, and I'll truly treasure the opportunity to represent you, and hopefully we cross paths again.
Commissioner Zip.
Yeah, just wanted to say thanks, Nick, and yeah, when you realize Vermont's not all that it's cracked up to be, you know where to find us, and but good luck on your new journey, and thanks for your service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and good luck in Vermont, and definitely thank you for all the legal stuff you did and the amazing victory you got for us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Commissioner Hauser, I'm sorry.
I would add that there are worse places than Vermont. And the highest peak in the state is like 5,000 feet, and you can easily trek up that from Burlington. So chip it off and then come back and go to 14,000.
Will do, and I'll struggle on that 14,000 too. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Nick. Next up is Ms. Kelson on some real estate matters. Welcome in.
Good morning and thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. It is still morning, isn't it? Yeah. Director Broscheid and members of the commission. I'm Ann Kelson. I'm the real estate section manager at Parks and Wildlife. And I had two projects that I'd like to separately present to you in addition to the items that are on our consent agenda for the real estate matters this month. Both of these projects are RFP projects. They were approved by the commission to go forward and negotiate November of 2016. They're both 2016 RFP projects. The first of these two projects, and I'll let you read the bulk of this, I won't just read the materials to you, is the Flanders Ranch RFP. It's an access easement and third-party conservation easement with the Nature Conservancy. Flanders Ranch is located along the Yampa in Routt County. The ranch is roughly 1,659 acres. There's a great deal of big game use and also a lot of species of greatest conservation need habitat on that ranch. The main reason that we're separating this out for your separate consideration is just to make sure that you're aware of in this particular project, the request that staff is making is the approval to go ahead and, at your approval today, close the conservation easement as soon as this closing can occur. And then at the point at which we can bring the access easement to the Capital Development Committee, we will do that. We would like to do that before we close anything, and if we're not, if the scene, the environment is such that we're not given the approval by the Capital Development Committee to close the project, then we'd like the approval today from you to allow that conservation easement to be separately closed, and we will then work with landowners to do whatever might be necessary to modify certain conceptual terms of the access easement to make it more palatable to the Capital Development Committee if necessary, and move forward at some point to attempt to close the access easement separately. So this RFP was a project that was approved by you as a project for both the conservation easement and the access easement, and we're needing to separate that for a number of reasons having to do with the project and the lengthy time frame that this has taken to get this to this point. I'm happy to discuss any more aspects of the Flanders Ranch project. We're also shifting around the funding a little bit.
However, we're still intending to fund the same amount for the project that was approved in total by the commission originally when the 2016 RFP projects were approved. So again, you can see the breakdown if you'd like. Happy to discuss those details.
Chair.
Commissioner Vigil.
I have a question. This is Habitat Stamp and GOCO funding. What's the breakdown between the two?
I don't know the answer to that, and oftentimes that answer is actually not arrived at until quite close before the project is closed, because they try to use up I'm too close to this thing. They try to use...
We've had problems. It's not you.
Okay. They try to, tell me if I'm not talking loud enough. They try to use up the oldest funding, and also they try to make sure that any Habitat Stamp restrictions are taken into account and such like that. So I'm sorry I can't give you that breakdown at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner McDaniel.
Is the, could you explain to me again, is the access easement issues and the reason why I can't proceed together because of, are you saying that because of the CDC approval and so forth, or issues with the landowners in order to get them? And is it possible, if we did approve the conservation easement, to make it conditional that the access easement is not arrived at, the prior approval is terminated? Because I would have a problem with that kind of money with no access being granted on the property, ultimately.
Mr. Chair? As to your first question, the reason the access easement would have to wait on closing is for the approval by the Capital Development Committee, because we do have to bring the access easement to the Capital Development Committee for its recommendation under statute. So we will attempt to do that in September if that's either not possible to do, or if the Capital Development Committee does not recommend it at that juncture. We want the ability to go forward with that conservation easement. The landowner is more than willing, has been from the beginning, to deliver the access easement according to the terms and in the documentation that we've all agreed to. So we don't have any issues at all with having the landowner's approval to move forward with this. The only glitch we have right now is frankly a procedural one and a political one, and that landowner comes from a standpoint where they need to have the closing of the conservation easement take place sooner than waiting for any possible glitches from the Capital Development Committee to be worked out. It's absolutely not coming, there are none of these issues coming from the landowner's perspective. They're all coming from the sort of the procedural work that we need to do, and we have to be careful in doing it, given the environment.
Let's see, I think, should we do these in sequence, or?
I think one at a time would be the best.
So the chair would invite a motion or any other commentary.
So if this is set up so that if you accept the agenda item that you're looking at now for the Flanders, you can simply, if you want to, you can simply approve the agenda item like you do the consent agenda, and that would be fine.
I don't think it's appropriate for the consent agenda. I'm not certain we're going to get a unanimous vote, so I think go ahead, Commissioner Zoe.
I think, relations with the CWC has improved, dramatically over the last year, and one of the things we heard from members was that they wanted to see more public access. So I look at this as more of a procedural thing. I think the likelihood that the access easement's going to be questioned is pretty low, and so personally I don't see any issues with how it's proposed here. In order to move this deal forward, especially when communication, has been much improved, and I think this, that public access easement is going to be very attractive to the Capital Development Committee. So just, that's my thoughts on it.
Commissioner Haskett.
I'm not really familiar with the past with the CDC and all of that, but I do know this of where the property is located, and it's along the river. It is a valuable asset to us. And that area, in all of our state, it's growing quickly, and we're going to start losing those opportunities. This is an area of high development right now. It's close to Steamboat. It could be something that we may not have available, and the fact that this started way back in 16 is amazing that they've waited this long too. And I guess we have to try something through CDC and see what's going to happen. I don't know what happened in the past exactly, but that's a learning curve that the three of us that are new are going to have to figure out, but we've got to start somewhere.
Ms. Kelson, could you tell us what the access, is this limited access? Is it extensive access? Could you kind of describe that? Because I know that's one of the issues that comes up in front of CDC.
It is, and one of the things that happened with this particular project was that when the access, when it appeared that the appraised value of the access was going to be lower than the parties were going to be comfortable with, we worked with the landowner to increase the access. So we have an access level that I think is fair, and certainly JT can speak to that if you'd like, that I think is very fair for this particular property. I can take the lead, JT, or JT, you can take the lead if you'd like on the specifics of the access.
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, JT Romatsky, Northwest Regional Manager. Thanks for letting me come up here. Some of these projects are a little bit fresh for me too, so I'm learning a bunch of this, but I appreciate the comments. Since 2016, this family is really has a huge desire to get this done. From an access perspective, Ms. Kelson is correct. I think it was originally the appraisal for the access came in significantly higher than what we had negotiated with the landowners. We had gone back then and renegotiated and elevated that agreement with them, so we increased the cost for access. This is about a half a mile of river on the Yampa, so we have fishing access. It also adds to some continuity of some other properties that are right there in that same vicinity with the Nature Ranch and some of our other easements. For waterfowl hunting, it's going to provide about 4 hunters per day for waterfowl hunting. And then for big game, we've got all sorts of opportunities. If you kind of do the math, and I won't run through it all, but if you go through the 8 different big game hunting periods and about 8 hunters per each period, we're looking at somewhere about 60, 64 hunters per year for big game access. That doesn't include mountain lion and some of the other opportunities, but we're trying to look at this with the family in a meaningful way that would say let's provide quality, good opportunities for access, not just essentially open the gates and let folks go in there. So I hope some of that provides an answer to what you're asking for, but if there's additional stuff, I'm happy to try and answer.
That's very complete. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Veal.
JT?
Oh, sorry.
Somebody that knows the area. When I'm looking at the map, on the north side of the Yampa River, it looks to me like it's more than a half a mile. I mean, there's a half a mile of both sides of the river, but on the north shore, it looks like there's another maybe half mile or so.
That's correct. Let me pull this stuff up here. So the access we're getting is for about 0.55 miles of access. There's already an additional, a little over 1 mile of access associated with another property right next to it. So that's probably within the constraints of the map, that's probably what it's showing.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Hauser.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just also looking at the map, so how close is this to the Carpenter Ranch? Is it to the Nature Conservancy site there?
I don't think it's, I mean, obviously it's in the same general area.
Not adjacent?
No, it's not adjacent.
Just curious.
a little bit north.
Commissioner McDaniel.
I think I've asked this question before, Commissioner Howard, and been told no, but maybe I just need a reminder. So it's possible to do a one-year evergreening access easement until this is through, so that if the conservation easement is approved, access begins immediately, and we have access until the CDC addresses this, rather than having to wait.
Mr. Chair, that's absolutely something we can bring up as a possibility with the landowner. If the landowner, they're more than willing to grant that access today, so it's very possible that they'd be willing to allow this to be for a term so that we can do the work necessary to acquire the permanent access. That isn't something we've discussed with the landowner, so I can't, promise it today, but I can promise that we can bring that up, and if the commission directs, we can make that request.
I just want to add something really quickly. Margaret Taylor, Assistant Director for Capital Parks and Trails. Commissioner McDaniel, just to make sure that you understand how the process works. With third-party conservation easements, which is what this is, we do not need to take that to the CDC. I just want to make sure that that is clear. We can close third parties without ever going to the CDC. And we do that on a regular basis. We do conservation easements separate from access a lot. Sometimes we just do conservation easements alone without access if there is a wildlife value. This property has a significant wildlife value, so the conservation easement ranked high, and we would want that conservation easement for the conservation values regardless of the access. The only thing that we need to bring to the CDC is the access. As Commissioner Zip said, they do like access a lot, and this is more open access, so it probably won't be a problem. When we go to the CDC, we let them know that there was a third-party agreement that was closed for conservation easement, but they're not voting on that at all. So basically, in this case, what we want to do is have the ability to close the third party and then take the access separate. And that's because it will give these landowners the opportunity to get that closed and do all the things that they need to do financially, and then take the access at a later time. So the whole point of this is to split them up. Does that make sense? Does that help?
I understand.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. Commissioner Zimmerman.
I'd like to make a motion that we, I think Ann, maybe if I do this wrong, correct me, but make a motion that we approve this, the plan to close the conservation easement separately and to move the access easement to the CDC. Is that the correct motion?
Yes, if you want to approve just the real estate proposal that you see in front of you as an agenda item, yes. I think that's essentially what you're doing.
Approve.
Commissioner Zip, second from Commissioner Zip. Adrian, any further discussion? Do I need public comment, council?
Sure it wouldn't hurt.
Any public comment? Seeing none, let's call the roll, Adrian.
Haskett?
Yes.
Hauser? Yes. McDaniel?
No.
Vigil?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Zip?
Yes.
And Howard?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Ian, before we go to the next project, would that split nature be because we've had a couple of unusual years here in a row, and so that's not a model that I would assume staff likes or would replicate in the future?
I couldn't state that more emphatically, Mr. Chairman. That's exactly why it has occurred, and that's a model that staff brings to you specifically because we think the model of the RFP as a project is the way that you are directing us to do the work.
I voted yes. I'm sympathetic. I'm very sympathetic to the concept that we ought to vote on both sides of this, if possible. I'm also sympathetic that we've had very unusual years here the last couple of years. So I'm glad to hear staff, we're on the same page.
We are very much on the same page.
Next, please.
This is the second of the two projects that I'm just bringing to you separately. Also, the RFP was approved by this body in 2016, in November of 2016. It's Pothook. We will, CPW will be acquiring both the conservation easement and the public access easement. And this project, this property is about 30 miles northeast of Craig and just south of the Wyoming border. It's about 2,300-acre project. The reason that you're seeing this off of a consent agenda item, like you usually will be seeing RFP projects, the reason it's slightly different is that, once again, because the landowner, when they apply, have to make certain assumptions about value, and then they make certain assumptions about donative components. The funding, as the appraisal turned out, was quite different than the values originally anticipated. And at the end of the day, the conservation easement amount that needs to be attributed to the conservation easement and needs to be attributed separately to the access easement has to be jiggered around from what you originally approved. It's all spelled out in the REP itself. At the end of the day, this commission would be approving this project still for less than what was originally the total amount that we were directed to negotiate as a total project. So a total amount for the consideration for this project would still be $2,640,140. And as I say, that's less than the total amount that was originally approved of $2,850,000. That's the main reason that this project is being brought to you separately, just so we can lay that out informationally for you, and you can be comfortable with that slight distinction jiggering in the numbers setup. And again, if you find this worthy of approving, then you can approve the REP as you see it, and that will work great for us.
Yeah, Commissioner Zimmerman.
I just want to commend staff on. I know you guys have had to do this a number of times when it takes a couple years, we approve it, and then we have appraisals and all sorts of things move around. And it's a really, some of the landowners, I'm not going to make a general stereotype, but a lot of these landowners, they really need to work with their tax attorneys and to make sure that they're getting the proper estate planning and tax planning with the conservation easement and what comes with that from the IRS and from the state tax credit program. And so I just want to commend staff for being willing to work with the landowners so that not only do we get incredible land, we get incredible access, but the landowner gets what they need to be able to preserve that land and make sure that we're doing this right. So I know it's a lot of work to come back after we've already, said, okay, we're going to do it like this, and then the appraisal comes back and they have to move things around so that financially it still works. And I just think it's a lot of work. It's like doing the project twice, and I commend you guys for sticking with it and being persistent, and solving problems that a lot of others might not be willing to find solutions. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
It sounded suspiciously like preamble to a motion. Commissioners?
I'd make a motion to approve this RFP as presented.
Thank you. Second from Commissioner Zimmerman. Any further discussion? Any public comment? I'll probably have that last piece down by the time I'm not chairman. Okay, Adrian, let's please call the roll.
Haskett?
Yes.
Hauser? Yes. McDaniel?
Yes.
Vigil?
Yes.
Zimmerman?
Yes.
Zip?
Yes.
And Chairman Howard?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you. And the consent agenda is still on the agenda, just to remind you.
Yes. You mean I have to get to the consent agenda. Before we do that, we have some public comment. First from Stephen, and I apologize, Guerreri. I hope I have that right.
He had to leave.
Oh, he had to leave. Okay. Then we have public comment from Mr. Kevin, I think it's Ched, if I'm reading that correctly. Welcome, Mr. Ched.
Thanks for having me up here, giving me this opportunity. I've lived in the valley about 35 years, and I've seen a lot of ups and downs and population-wise, and I think we're all in the mode these days that Colorado can't accept any more people. But call me an optimist, but I think there's still room to share Colorado's big game with gray wolves. And I know your position paper on it. I know that certain interests passed a state law with the House and Senate that would kind of dash any hopes that the commission would try to do a reintroduction like they once considered for the wolverine. I know this was back when the commission, when the Wildlife Agency merged with the Parks Department, and they suddenly decided that perhaps they should think this through again and see how the budget goes with the Parks Department. But I think there's still enough backcountry in Colorado, and if you put a small bonded pair in a few areas, that Mother Nature might take over. And if hunters would cooperate with a predator like the wolf and not have the hysteria that's gone on in Yellowstone Park, that I think wolves could survive here pretty handily. You know, there was a feasibility study done way back in 1994, I believe, and they thought the Gmug Forest District had the most habitat, and the San Juan was second. And the Rocky Mountain National Park was back in third because of their altitude. But I think that, you know, the federal government still has this thing called primacy, and if they ever got a burr in their saddle or whatever you want to, they would have the right to bring back the gray wolf through an endangered species clause. And right now, the wolves having a hard time trying to migrate south from Wyoming, and there'll be a full-scale hunting season for most of Wyoming this fall. So that's another benchmark that some people might put a nail in the coffin that any migration might not come through. But let me check here. I just wish the commission would take a more holistic view at predator-prey relationships and how the way you manage for GMUs, for a population guesstimate, I call it, because I read the papers throughout 3 different areas in the state, and going up in an airplane in the middle of winter and trying to take a estimate of how many elk you see on the white tundra, or whatever you want to call it, the white fields, and using a computer model to figure out how many you don't see or how many you do see, I don't think really gets the numbers across. But, you know, you never know. 2 years from now, there might be another president, there might be another budget in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife, another budget in the National Park Service. I just wish you would take another look at your gray wolf position. I know you've done good work with the lynx and the black-footed ferret, and you've done good work with the T&E species program, but I'm just calling out to give the wolf another look. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guerra. Commissioner Zimmerman.
I just want to say thank you for your comments. We don't get a whole lot of those lately, so thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes all of our public comment. As Ms. Kelsey was kind enough to remind me, we still have a couple things on the consent agenda. So the chair would entertain a motion to approve.
So move. Second.
Commissioner Vigil, seconded by Commissioner McDaniel. Commissioner Zip.
I just wanted to make a few brief comments regarding the Litvak property being bequested to the state, and specifically part of Lake Pueblo State Park. I remember moving to Pueblo in 2006, and I think it was that next summer there was an article about the chain of lakes idea, which essentially there's a series of gravel ponds below Lake Pueblo, below the reservoir, along the river bottom. And there was these 3 gravel ponds that at some point, 4 actually at the time, that at some point would be made available, to public access. And, this item here on the consent agenda is really what's going to finally make public access to those resources open to the public. It's a small inholding of private land. And I just wanted to commend staff at Lake Pueblo State Park, especially Brad Henley, prior park manager, current park manager Monique Mullis, and all the other local staff there that really never had a contract that guaranteed eventually that we could get this land, but they because the landowner just didn't want to put this in writing, but it was really just ongoing communication and relationship building between the agency, local staff there, and this property owner. And unfortunately, it did take the death of the property owner to make it a reality, but I just want to commend staff for working with this property owner and building that relationship that ultimately, Mr. Litvack followed through with his intentions of bequesting the property to the agency. So a lot of just a lot of work that went into that over the years that really is easy to not realize and put some credit towards. So it's very reassuring to see that this access will come, and that the public will hopefully in the next year or two be able to enjoy these resources that have kind of been there in the public eye and been on public land, but was unable to utilize. So,
thank you, Commissioner Zip. Any other comment? I think we can do this one by voice vote. So all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you very much. Our last item then is our legal report.
I have nothing unless the commission has something they want to hear from me about.
Commissioners?
And if there's something in the future, if you have a specific charge, we can prepare for next
I
go-around.
have one request on our next meeting, we've talked quite a bit about IPAWS, and I would like to have a discussion about where we are on the contract after our next meeting, and we've heard from the executives from our vendor.
Yes, sir. Understood.
Thank you. Any other legal questions? Well, thank you very much. Thanks for, I think, a very successful meeting. I appreciate everyone's help, and in particular staff. And thanks very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Adrian.
Is it me or is it all